Welcome to tonight's conversation with Steve McQueen. I'm Donna De Salvo, Senior Adjunct Curator, Special Projects here at DIA. And we're really delighted to be presenting Steve's work over two of DIA's venues, BASE, which was co-commissioned by DIA and Laurens Foundation, Schaulager Basel, is currently on view at DIA Beacon, and Sunshine State, here with Exodus and Bounty, are here in DIA Chelsea. Both presentations are on view until early summer 2025. And if you haven't seen BASE, I encourage you to get up there, because suddenly, before you know it, it's summer again. And then you can there that last day. So we're really delighted our partners from Schaulager are here with us this evening, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for all their efforts realizing each of these presentations, if you'll allow me a moment. Emily Markert, Randy Gibson, John Sprague, Curtis Harvey, and Alexis Pennington Foster, and of course, as well as a special thanks to our intrepid director, Jessica Morgan, for believing in all of this, David Morehouse, Camila Foreman, and Umberto Moro. And I'd also like to thank Kim Golding and Max Tanone for all their efforts organizing tonight's conversation. I don't think Steve needs much of an introduction, but I'm going to give it anyway. How's that? I get that disapproving glance. Steve was born in London in 1969 and lives in London and Amsterdam. Surveys of his work have been held at many museums, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Laurens Foundation Schaulager, Tate Modern, Pirelli Hangar Bicocca in Milan, and many more. He's participated in documented 10 and 11, as well as numerous Venice Biennales. He represented Great Britain in 2009. He's the recipient of the Turner Prize, the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal, Harvard University, and the Johannes Vermeer Award. And in 2020, he was made a Knight Commander of the Most Excellent Order. But I don't have to call him sir. Right? Okay. He directed the feature films Hunger, Shame, 12 Years a Slave, which won an Oscar for Best Motion Picture, and Widows, as well as the extraordinary series Small Axe. His documentary Occupied City, which came out last year, is based on the book Atlas of an Occupied City by Bianca Steger. And his next feature film, Blitz, will be released this fall? Yeah. Okay. Please join me in welcoming Steve McQueen. There is so much to talk about, and I think we'll try to do justice to as much as we can, talk for maybe about 40 minutes, and then leave roughly 20 minutes or so for Q&A. Steve, I haven't asked you this question, but I'm going to ask it now. Now that Chelsea has opened and BASE is open, how have you come to think about these two presentations? Do you envision them as one large whole? It's something I've been thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
It was all about discovery, lots of discoveries, lots of sort of things which, you live your life and then you saw things sort of emerge to question your situation now. I mean, the situation with Sunshine State was this conversation I had with my father just before he died. I imagine everyone's seen it, Sunshine State by now, so no spoilers. And to hear this story from him, and to put things somehow into context in a way. The reverberations are sort of the shock waves of that sort of happened for a long time before sort of putting it together in a way with the jazz singer, because I had this idea of jazz singer for 20 years of using it, and Al Johnson erased the erasure of him as he puts the makeup on. But as I said before, sometimes with an artwork you get the tail before you get the head, and so it's a case of discoveries. With BASE, it was a case of a sort of a provoked discovery. We had to find it. It's there. I know it's there. You know it's there. You just have to find it. as it were, and how it can emerge. And I had the confidence in that, the confidence to sort of do it in a way. Because again, I often think as an artist or whatever, whoever you are, it doesn't have to be an artist, but I think also we're all kind of Olympic athletes in a way. I said, you don't sort of, you don't train, you don't go for 100 meters final in Olympics. Then you're training for 4 years before you get that line. So therefore, there's a certain sense of muscle memory, or there's a certain sense of sort of understanding of the moment or the circumstance you find yourself in. So base again was this discovery, finding it, sort of a place for it. Again, same thing with Bounty. And Bounty was very strange because actually I didn't want to bloody do it. I was like, oh, do I have to do this? But sometimes, as as an artist, whatever, whoever you are, you have to do it. And I knew I had to do it. And I go all the way to photograph flowers, but I've just discovered the other day, I was just thinking about it, and I thought, they're wounds. Those flowers are wounds. They're flesh wounds. They're sort of wounds. And I see them as wounds. I see them as hurt. I see them as pain. Of course, obviously, they're bad witnesses to many things over centuries, and therefore there's a certain difference to how you see them now in context of the place and the country they have emerged. And again, artists has been working with flowers for God, since day one, but it's always about the context and the narrative of how they emerge and the soil and of course blood-soaked soil that they emerge from. So I would say that both have been a certain sense of discovery, and again, it's age as well. To be honest with you, it's age. I could never have made this 10 years ago. These things 10 years ago, and it's age, and it's a lot of, and it's a confidence of age, because I do think age is a superpower as well as some sense. It's always asking you questions, and you're always asking questions and getting answers, but it's giving you more questions and answers, and again, it's very fruitful. That's how I would say.
It's interesting because Bounty, it's not the first photographic series that you've made, and I was thinking a lot about Barrage.
Yes.
Which is, I think it's 56 color photographs, and that's
I can't remember. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 56. Okay, 56 of these bundled rags in the Parisian streets that were used to sort of almost like a little aqueduct to siphon off the water into the sewer system. And they're written about as in a very strange and uncanny way. And you've actually mentioned with Bounty that the flowers in a way have a perversity. And I wondered if you don't make that many photographic series, actually.
No, I'm not so keen on photographs. I mean, they're cheap, aren't they? I don't mean to be rude, but it's difficult to make photographs. It's just difficult. It's just a difficult thing. I just find it very difficult because a photograph is a photograph is a photograph. So, again, especially if, you task yourself of photographing flowers and the cliche, the kitschness of it, but for me, again, it was always about the sort of narrative of the root, of the soil, of the context. And again, I said it before, but I remember when those journalists asking me, 12 Years a Slave, you made this beautiful movie about something very horrible. How can you do that? And I said, well, sometimes the most horrible things happen in the most beautiful places. That's just it. That's just perverse, and that's how we are. That's what we're living in. It's a perversity, but that's how it is. That's who we are. That's how we sort of have to sort of surf and navigate our way through this cesspool somehow.
I want to sort of go to the what I've always not only admired but been fascinated in your work is the way you work with the projected image and the space it occupies. And Okwuyen Weezer, the great curator and writer, said that your work is grounded in the attempt to undo the predictability of the filmed frame as image alone. And he even draws parallels between minimalist sculpture and that deliberate spatial specificity of your projection rooms as what he calls scripted spaces. And these are very scripted spaces that we're seeing here. The conditions, even the wall color, all of these things.
I spend a lot of time on that. That's, again, you don't take anything for granted. Again, how you see things, how you enter, how you are introduced to something for the first time is very, very important. And I take the public extremely seriously. How you enter space, how you enter into space, how you go from one work to the next work, and how you sort of go back and unravel the work as you go backwards. The whole idea of one entrance, one exit. One entrance, one exit. So you look at the work, you study the work, you go to the next one, and you come back and sort of rewind it, review it in a different context as you would have done it if you first entered it. I don't like entrances and exits. No, it's like a supermarket, isn't it? Or no, not even a supermarket. Actually, you come back to the till, but through the gift shop. I like entrances being the same as the exits. It's very important. Who was I when I entered? Who am I as I leave? It's very important. And I worked with my technician Sue McDermott for 25 years. It's our anniversary this year. 25 years we worked together. We worked together for the first time in the Turner Prize '99, and we've been working together ever since. Yeah.
So just to go, before we get deeper into the works that are on view here in Beacon. I know you've often talked about your experience in film school, and you weren't very happy with it, and that to a large extent your training is more in painting and sculpture. Do you see that your work fits somewhere between, in a sense, as kind of art history and cinema, occupying these two spaces?
Art history and cinema. Listen, an art education is fantastic, isn't it? Art education is like, geography, history, everything. Art history. I mean, what we learn from the past is artifacts, and it's historical. I just feel that it's to be in depth, embedded in that, is just a great sort of foundation for anything. I never forgot when I was at NYU, and one of my first years. And people didn't know who Matisse was or Cézanne. I was like, how's that possible? Why did you come to art school and not know who Matisse or Cézanne is? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're looking at frames. I mean, so I don't know. I would say yes. I mean, history of cinema, again, I was very fortunate enough to be immersed and embedded in art and cinema. Just very lucky. I went to repertory cinemas when I was a kid. I saw 3 films a day. I had this Swiss girlfriend who introduced me to cinema. I was like more likely to go to cinema to sort of back row with the girls, not watching the movies at all. But then I fell in love with this girl. We watched the movies, and I thought, wow, what is this? I saw the world. I saw how people fell in love. I saw how people ate. I heard people argued. I saw all these amazing things through the projected image, and and as it was supposed to be seen in the cinema. It was like incredible. It was an awakening. Maybe because, again, when you're in love with someone and you're discovering cinema for the first time, and you're just going through the whole catalog. We went to BFI, went to Everyman, we went Ritzy, we went Riverside Studios, everywhere to see movies. And it was just incredible. As well as that time being in art school, being in Goldsmiths, and studying arts. It was immersive.
Yeah, how have you thought, I mean, just because this work is being seen, of course, here it's Chelsea, but up in Beacon, it's in the context, of course, minimalist art. Felix Gonzalez Torres, who's someone I know you deeply admire, Andy Warhol, Bruce Nauman, number of artists we've talked about that actually are in Dia's collection.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I never thought, there was no, when I was making the work, I had no reference to that. I mean, again, I wasn't thinking of those things, but again, because I was thinking of light, by coincidence, it's kind of strange, and again, I'm not interested in fitting in or being sort of slotting into that sort of context or that environment, but hey, it happened through light. That's what I can say. But
it is what makes the work so distinctive, is this very visceral, physical experience that happens.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think with bass, it is a sense of soul, whatever that is. It's a sense of again, the sort of the subterranean sort of sonic sound, which sort of vibrates your diaphragm, that sort of enters you. Often we all hear, we're all warriors, we're all sort of, in the sense of we have our barriers and we have our armor, and not often, sometimes things can penetrate that. And I've been very fortunate, you've had that experience with art, when something just penetrates you through its sheer being, the sheer force of being. And yeah, again, that's, again, I think with music or those kind of sounds, it can actually stir you from the inside, and that's what the attempt was. I mean, the attempt was to sort of, bring a certain sense of soul into the environment, as well as to sort of transport you out of, that sort of sense of being into a sense of feeling, rather.
Do you recall the first time you went to Beacon? And
I do. Yeah, I do. I just thought, wow, it's fantastic.
And especially that lower level. I don't know what you saw there when you went. If it was a Nauman piece, probably mapping the studio.
It's interesting how your voice goes up an octave. Was it Nauman? No. No. When you're thinking, was it? I think it was. Yes, I think it was mapping the studio, possibly. Yeah.
So this is what we do here sometimes. So I was thinking a lot about how your work appeals to all the senses, sound, light, and how fundamental, speaking about bass, that sense of embodiment. And there's a work of yours that I love called Girls Tricky, that you're in a recording studio with Tricky, trip-hop musician, as he rehearses a track, and that there's this incredible experience of a very specific place. There's a sense of specificity there, of being in the recording studio, or in Western Deep, that claustrophobia, I think is it 3 miles underground, and the South African mine, which I think you told me, I think I asked you if you'd ever make that work again, and you said you were very young.
I got older.
Yeah.
No, certain things I wouldn't do again.
But getting back to bass, in a sense, there's a different idea of place and space there. There's a reference point that you had of the middle passage that you had very early on, but it's a much more open-ended space. It doesn't have that specificity in the same way.
It's a starting point. It's a starting point, the journey. It was a starting point. The idea sort of started along, again, this is weird, but the conversation happened with Oakley, I remember, because he was doing some show, we were having a conversation, and unfortunately he was in hospital. And, we were talking, and I said, well, I have this idea. I want to do this situation where I bring some African musicians over on a boat, and also not African and South American and West Indian, musicians on a boat, and transport them as they sort of, rehearse, they collaborate on a boat over, on the Middle Passage from, West Africa, say, to Bahia or whatever. I thought that could be very interesting to sort of find out what, that was the huge ambition, to get a boat, musicians jam or whatever, find out what would happen. So we had this conversation, and so that was, again, I just think I'm thinking also of Sunshine State and my dad and that story. I'm thinking of, this person I very much Oakley and that conversation. So these things are, I didn't know, how things happen. I think, I understand this. I understand what this is about, because, that conversation was important, and I told him what I wanted to do. We spoke about it, and then when I see bass now, how can I have not thought that had some kind of context to the piece as well as other things? Because as you said, it's open-ended, but the starting point was a conversation, and to transcend to transcend from, the sort of the passage, the movement, the journey. And with that, with the waves, with again with sound, and how that could actually sort of manifest itself in a way where by the time you get to the new world, you have got something. Again, that's why I thought it could be interesting. And then, of course, that way, obviously that didn't happen. And then base came about in the sense of bringing people, Marcus and others together to sort of congregate and to sort of do something with that. Yeah, sorry, I went away there, but no, because what it is obviously it's kind of obvious, but it was the whole idea of movement, journey. Movement journey and the whole idea of a perseverance in that way. And again, the subterranean, the sub base.
Yeah, I was just wondering because people who have experienced the work have talked about the basement, the space itself as being like the hold of a ship.
Yes.
That you really have that feeling of you're descending and you're sort of, there's no light down there.
No.
And the building, of course, Beacon, all of you who've been there, of course, has this wonderful sawtooth light, all the natural light. That is the one place in the lower level where there is no natural light.
No.
And I remember when we first spoke about, the invitation, you were pretty clear that was the space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also mentioned Chelsea. Those were like two spaces.
I'm greedy, man.
Well, that I know.
I don't know. I just, what you want?
I'm glad we could,
Well, you got one life, ain't you? Go for it. Yeah. No. Anyway.
I mean, in a way, it's interesting to have Sunshine State and have Base, which are taking on, kind of similar trajectories, similar ideas about African diaspora, and of course, the very different distinction with Sunshine State is this personal story of yours. It's also the first time you've used your own voice.
Yes, but also there's an in. I mean, yes, it is specific to a certain extent, absolutely, but there's an in for everybody. Again, there's an in. I think that's it's not just it is specific to that experience, but it's welcoming to others, and whatever it stirs in individuals and memories and whatnot, that's very important too. Again, it has to be that sort of generous, otherwise it becomes sort of a dilute. It becomes something of it becomes dead. In a way.
Well, or it would just live at the level of the autobiographical, which is
it's a starting
fixed.
Point. It's a starting point. That's it. That's it. But sorry, your question, it was kind of. I apologize. I went off on that one. What was it again?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. It's interesting to think about. Of course, your quotation of cinema, and it's interesting, early cinema with Bear and particularly Deadpan, which goes to a 1928 silent film, and then the Jazz Singers, a 1927 talkie. Why did it take 20 years to get to? Well,
I couldn't get the rights. The thing about Jazz Singer, I couldn't get the rights because I didn't know my father's portion of it, but I wanted to work with that material for 20 years or so, and I just wanted that. Al Johnson erased himself as he put the makeup on. I want him to be invisible. One could talk about Ralph Ellison, one could talk about other things, but it was more to do with the whole idea of him erasing himself. So after many years, I was very lucky because of course I make movies now, and I talked to the head of Warner Brothers, and they gave me permission. Then I went to speak to the Al Johnson estate because I didn't want to just take it. I wanted to speak to Al Johnson estate, and they were very generous to sort of say yes, please, yes, use the footage. Of course, now it's out of copyright, so I use it anyway. But I just love that idea of talking to the Al Johnson estate and then giving permission for me to use it. Again, it was just one of those things where it just fascinated me that material. And again, I'm a filmmaker, so a feature filmmaker. So the whole idea of that being my one of my stock and trades, and getting into these narratives where the first talkie is pretty horrific, to be quite frank, or again, it's like the whole idea of Steamboat Bill Jr., which is Deadpan. Steamboat Bill Jr. was it was a Mickey Mouse picture. Again, and Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny are based on minstrels. That's why they have the gloves. They're based on minstrels. They're the most popular entertainers of the time. So Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny were based on that. And Steamboat Bill Jr. is where obviously Deadpan. The work I made about Buster Keaton, because Buster took on the sketch, I think, from that of Mickey Mouse and the facade falling over him. So there's all these kind of connotations and references to one of my stock in trades. I just need to sort of work through that personally, and just sort of, I just needed to sort of investigate it. And therefore, when my father told me that story, after that, I just, that was it, the light bulb went off. And again, to make the work is interesting because it's ideas, but it's physical. To make work is physical. It's putting this thing here, this and this there, seeing if it works, and no, it doesn't work, because your ideas are limited. They are limited. Then you have to do it, physically do it. And it's a chore, it's work, it's W-O-R-K, that's what it is. So, and then when you work, and get it, the physical, because mental can only take you so far, and then you have it. Again, the thing about the sun, it was just one of those things where it was, again, Sunshine State, and okay, what is that? What is the sun? And getting these images of the sun through NASA, and then manipulating the image and the two suns. And again, I'm that person at school who had the lazy eye. Remember the guy or the girl with the patch and the glasses? Okay, that was me. So the whole idea of focus and eye testing and focus and shifting of focus with the two suns coming forward and behind. So of course, you're not meant to look at the sun, are you? That'd be stupid.
Very friendly suns either.
Not to the eye, no. You're not supposed to look at the sun, as you know. So again, and color, of course. That's how we have all this stuff. Light. So again, and our light source. So just fascinated with that.
Is that the most kind of manipulation of? I mean, when I think about your work, the level of the digital manipulation in Sunshine State is profound. I mean, the way you've reworked that image.
Yeah.
I don't think of earlier works or works prior to that have had that same level.
No, and we went quite far because what you see Al Johnson doing is a rehearsal. It's not his actual performance in the picture. So basically, he didn't have gloves on, so we made the gloves for him. And again, that emphasizes the sort of the minstrel, because as his rehearsal, he didn't put the gloves on, but at the end of the picture, he has gloves. So the gloves you see on, they're sort of computer generated, yeah.
I mean, of course, it's within the U.S. and on the East Coast to show that work, given what is happening in the state of Florida, it takes on a whole level of meaning. Obviously, there's a personal narrative, and also you've spoken this of not just your own narrative of your father coming as a migrant to pick oranges and the horrific event that happens, but I think this way in which that you're able to conflate, you find the present in the past and the past in the present. There's that way you bring those two together. It's what I've always admired and been fascinated in your work, is I think to conflate those two. It never lives in history, this work, it's now, and yet it trades on history. There's this constant back and forth. I don't know if that's how you see it, but.
I mean, again, you can think of, Disneyland in Florida. That's where it started. Again, there's so many kind of connotations that one could think about as far as that narrative, and of course what's going on as far as libraries and books being taken away in that particular state. Erasure, to remove. Therefore, again, me telling my father's story, and then taking phrases away. So the first one, I take the first bits of phrase away, and then put that back in and take that phrase away, and then end up with words.
Your treatment of language.
What are we left with? What are we left with? What memories we're left with? I mean, again, someone tells you a story, by the time you tell that 4th, 10th person, it's a different kind of story. Now, what's been taken away, what's been added, what's been subtracted, so forth and whatnot. But it often is erasure. And that's why I want to sort of, investigate.
So the first time we worked together was the presentation of end credits,
yes.
which was about Paul Robeson's FBI file. And I mean, there is this fascination with the U.S. on many levels, 12 Years a Slave. Yeah, okay. I mean, no. I mean, I just think there's the Robeson character has been very meaningful for you.
Well, Robeson was he was American, but he was internationalist. I mean, he became political in the UK. That's where he became politicized, because
I think I recall actually it was your next door neighbor who told you about Robeson.
Yes, it was my next neighbor, Milton. Milton was a Grenadian guy who, yeah, he used to sort of send me newspaper cuttings and put it in the door and stuff like that. He was extraordinary, and unfortunately died of asbestos poisoning. He was an airline engineer, but he was one of these guys who he posted me this pamphlet of Welsh anniversary celebration of Paul Robeson. I said, what's this black guy on the front? But in Wales, what's that about? But Paul Robeson's relationship with Welsh miners and their sort of struggles was pretty, amazing. And he obviously made that film in Wales as well. So yeah, he was an internationalist. So yeah, and again, I have a fascination. America. You're a pretty big country. I mean, it's very difficult to avoid. You pick up pieces of the wall. I mean, the Sunshine State has everything to do with my father as much as it's to do with Florida.
Yeah, there was a period of time. I remember we were trying to get you here. You were a little bit like, "Oh, America. I don't know if I want to go to America, but."
Shut up.
I have no apologies for.
No, apparently not. Jesus. So. I'm on a visa. What's the matter with you? No, did I say that?
It's a contentious time here, I think, and I think it's fascinating on so many levels that all of these works are actually on view at a time, when we have an election coming up. I think it's going to be quite, I think they're going to mean in a variety of different ways, by the context.
Yeah, look, there's nowhere as great. Right now. I mean,
well, yes, I think that's a global condition.
Look at the Netherlands, where where I live now. I mean, it's pretty terrible. With this sort of fascist sort of majority. I mean, the majority party. They're not the majority votes, but they're the majority, the biggest party in government. The recent sort of race riots in the UK. I mean, it is what it is. So whatever. But
well, I think, with Occupy City, the film that you made, released last year, it's, seeing what's going on in Amsterdam at that time, protests that were happening, some having to do with COVID, that there's such a strong feeling in that. I remember when I saw it at the film festival, I thought, this is a totally anti-fascist film. It just came across in so many ways. And I wanted to ask about that. It is a 4.5-hour running time, Occupy City. And, that pushes the envelope on a lot of levels. And I wonder if you could talk about this idea of time and duration.
Well, it's a wave. I mean, again, it's like what I was interested in is that, of course, you're not going to grab everything or hold everything, but it's about the experience. I mean, I wasn't interested in making a history lesson. I was interested in making an experience of a film. It was a meditation rather than a sort of history lesson. And again, it tells you that you couldn't possibly hold everything in on the atrocities of what went on, the Holocaust in the Netherlands and elsewhere in Europe. You couldn't. But the attempt was to sort of immerse you into something. And sometimes you will forget. Sometimes you listen to the dialogue and not look at the image. Sometimes you look at the image and not listen to the dialogue. And it's like an opera. It's like the whole idea of time and duration. And then you come back to yourself. You might think it is about a living experience. It's a living experience. Being there. Being there.
There's a cumulative effect, and I remember when I saw it, and after the first 2 hours, I did say to myself, there was an intermission, and I thought, I don't know, another 2 hours. I mean, I had to question it in my head. I did, because I was like, wow, another 2 hours. 4.5 hours is long. It's a commitment.
Yeah.
But then when I came back after the intermission, and I kept going, I was like, okay, yes. Like it's hard to describe the experience of it, because it really was, of course, the narrator's voice is so incredible that brings you along.
She's extraordinary.
And there's something about being witness and listening, and your body goes through a change. And I think that to me was, because sitting in a theater for that period of time is very different than even sitting in a gallery in some way. You're in a seat, you don't move around, and that's when it really, like funneled through me in a physical way that at the end I was kind of speechless in a very powerful way. And I can recall the experience as much as anyone can recall an experience much later on. And I mean, I think that is such a powerful thing, that you actually internalize an experience in that way and it stays with you. And then I thought, okay, now I get why it's 4.5 hours long. So that's my compliment.
Well, you know, it's work. No, it's work. It's hard work. I mean, it's just like when you go, you know, you exercise or do the yoga, the first 20 minutes of me running, it's like, oh, what the fuck am I doing this for? And then you break through. You know, or a piece of music, you stay with it, and you break through, and then you break through, and you're there, you're with it, you're in it, you're there, you know, meditating in it, and you couldn't think of being in any other place. You get into a different state of mind. That's what it's about, and you know, it's work, and you could do it or not do it. You go back on your phone. You know, it's up to you. It's your choice. You know.
Well, the thing that always, you know, as a curator, you cannot control where people go in the gallery. You can create a narrative, but fundamentally, and I always thought, of course, what filmmakers have the capacity to do is to really lead you through. And I was curious about the earliest work here is Exodus, which you filmed in '92. Mm-hmm. And then I think you said you released it in '97. Mm-hmm. And I, you know, it strikes me as, in a way, your first narrative film. I mean, it's only a minute long, but it tells a story. Because I don't actually remember in the process myself when you decided, when we were working on the configuration here, when you made that decision to include Exodus.
Well, quite early on. It was, I think, one of the first things, because I knew there's something maybe about the thing I knew as in Sunshine State, and I knew that this piece, the ritual, because when I remember when I first, I had a guy called John Thompson, my art professor a long time ago, said, "Oh, you want to make films? Well, if you want to make films, you can have a camera with you all the time." And it was, have a camera with you. So we got the Super 8 camera, and it was all the idea of recognizing things, seeing things. The whole idea of, you know, seeing, again, the corny, extraordinary, and the ordinary, but sort of seeing it, recognizing it. And these two plants were walking down the road, and I put my camera out, and out came these two men in their hats. And I knew that these guys were lovers. I knew. And there was this ritual going down the road, and I just wanted to follow them. I didn't know where it would lead to. And that was it. And then we got on the bus and waved. I knew I had this thing, and I didn't know what it was. Again, you have to. Again, what was it? It was just, you know. Sometimes as an artist, you want things so badly, you become a magnet, and it sticks to you. It comes to you. You want it so bad, you don't even. But you have to be ready, aware, or recognize it when it occurs. But you want something so badly that it comes to you, or your eyes get sharpened to see it. Oh, there it is. And often it's right underneath your bloody nose, you know what I mean? It's right underneath your nose. And I always thought, you know, a good artist should be able to make work from other stuff underneath their bed. Why not? You shouldn't have to go to wherever far-flung country. You should be able to make great work from things you find underneath your bed. Absolutely. So, but then you have to sort of, you know, recognize it. You know, you have to sort of attune to it. You have to adapt to it, and you have to find it.
I mean, it's wonderful because we don't fully know the story of these two men.
No.
We know something about them, but we also don't know a lot of other things about them. There's a moment where they turn. There's a moment in Occupy City. It's the only moment in that whole film that I can recall, where there's a young girl walking.
Yes.
And just like in this movie, in Exodus, in the video, there's a moment when one of them, or maybe both of them, they become aware that it's one of them, they're aware that you're filming them, and they smile. And in Occupy City, there's a young girl, and she turns, and she's the only time, I believe, in that 4.5 hours,
she breaks the frame,
where somebody registers that you're filming. It's, you know, things that, and you know, what changed in your mind that you decided in '97 that film should be out in the world? I recognized it.
I knew I had something. I was 22, but I knew I had something. I didn't know what it was, and I sat on it, and again, it's the only time it's ever happened. Again, is with Grenfell was a different situation, of course, because I shot it in 2018 and we put it out 2023. That's another thing. But this was one of those things which I knew I had something, but I was too young. I knew I had something, but I didn't know what it was. And time, age, maturity, you understand. That's it.
I mean, Grenfell hasn't been seen in the U.S., but I'm sure people have read about it. It documents the horrific fire that happened in Kensington Council, isn't it? Right?
Labrador, Notting Hill, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, to me, that also, you talk about it as almost a kind of monument of what happened, but it also has a deeply political meaning. It also has a sense of being, you're trying to change the conversation or influence a conversation. I know you invited MPs to see it. I mean, there's a lot of coverage right now. I don't know if you saw it that way, but it's so beautifully moving and sad to see that, and simple. I mean, I say simple in a way that's the complexity of being simple, because we start out not outside of London, but you're sort of far away. And then it's this one continuous take, correct? And, just to get to I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say about Grenfell. It's hard because people haven't really...
People get a chance to see it, so therefore we could
talk
about
it
further. No. It's okay.
So I'm sure you were asked this question many times, but I'll ask it again, which is, you've always described yourself as an artist who makes films. No. And, you are really one of the few individuals that I can think of who successfully maintains a career in the art world and the film world. And, it's not my world, so I can only speculate what that world is. But it's curious how you navigate. Do you see them as two separate worlds? Do they intersect it? Because there are moments in your films where you very clearly see a long take, like, of course, in Hunger, the long take, or 12 Years a Slave, when Solomon Northup is dangling from the tree, that maybe other commercial filmmakers would never make. But, that's a very different terrain. It's a commercial market, not that the art world isn't, but it's quite different. How do you see those functioning in how you...
I don't really think about it that hard. I just do it. I don't, I don't really think about it that hard. It's, just get on with it. I mean, you really just get on with it. I made this film called Blitz, which is it's 2 hours, bang. It's fast. It's a journey. It's thrilling. It's exciting, and it's not occupied city. It's just I just. How can I? Again, I think lots of people ask me this question. And it's like, there's nothing special. It's just get on with it. It's nothing special. Maybe if it provoked me or something, I should say, that's really special. But it's like, if you're sort of, making a souffle or you're riding a bike, very different, but you could do both. Why not? Hopefully you could do them very well. Souffle not so good, but hey, I do try. You know what I mean? Get on with it. Don't question it. It's not that fascinating. It's just got to be half decent. That's all. But you hope.
Well, we're going to turn it to questions, but before we do that, I'm going to do my little sales pitch of the book, which is now available in our bookshop and is co-published by Dia and the Schaulager, Laurence Foundation, and it's so beautiful.
It's
and
great
I
book.
do want to point it out. It's on sale in the bookshop, and it documents to a large extent the project at base, but it's also its own experience. And we worked with a legendary book artist.
Maya Uri. Irma Bohm,
Irma Bohm, and Maya Uri, of course, from the Schaulager, who has been a great partner, and Isabel, who's here. And I mean, this has really been a labor of love for many. So that's my commercial moment. I don't get any royalties from it, so nothing like that. But I think we're going to open it up to questions. I hope you have some questions. And
thank you so much. It's really fascinating. Is there anything that you'd like to work on, but you feel like you're not ready to do it at this, as you're percolating ideas? Because you talked about, it takes time, you have to see it, possibly live it. So is there something that you want to work on, but you just feel like, not now?
Yeah, I do a lot of research on my pictures and works. This is just the research, and I plant a lot of seeds, and that's why I'm able to do a lot, because things aren't. I plant a lot of seeds, and certain things wither and die. Some things flourish. Some things just like stay there, waiting to sort of grow. So there's things which are sort of just lots of research and lots of thinking and lots of, again, it never switches off. My studio is in my head, and I think it's lots of research. And of course, often you're close to doing something, you thought, this is terrible, so you just wasted 3 years of your life. But at least there's another thing which you could go back to. But I don't know about that, about things, because I'm sort of very sort of methodical, very careful. And no, things happen over a certain period of time. Again, it's very strange. It's just one of those. It's just hard work. It's boring. I'm sorry, it's hard work. I wish it could be more exciting, but it's hard work. Yeah.
I would like to say thank you, and just share this really brief story on how I discovered you. So right around the corner, 1 block away, there's a movie theater on like 23rd. It's closed now, but 23rd and 8th, there was a movie theater there forever. Back in the day, they had this thing called Free Movie Tuesdays. And it's when you had, with your cable company, if you had a landline, if you had cable, and if you had internet, you would get 2 free movie tickets every single Tuesday. And so I would use them and maybe take a friend. Oftentimes I would just see 2 movies by myself. And there was one day where there was this movie about, I was like, oh, a movie about, a sex addict. I don't know if I want to see that. That's not really me, but I heard it got some good reviews. So I was like, hey, I'll go and see this. So I go and watch this movie, and then I'm like, okay, it's a good movie. But what stopped me in my tracks was there was a scene where the main character, Fassbender, is on a train and he's looking at this woman, and they're like giving, they're looking at each other like, ooh, you want to do me, I want to do you, they're looking back and forth. But what stopped me in the middle of the movie was the scene where the woman is looking at him, but she's in the corner of the frame, and what took up most of the space in the frame was just a black man on a train, just sitting there, going about his business. And this black man took up so much space on the frame. In my head, I was like, oh my God, I have to find out who made this movie. Because this man was just existing. Like, he wasn't hypersexualized, he wasn't emasculated, he wasn't a menace, he wasn't anything. He was just a black man existing. Big, dark-skinned black man just existing. So the movie's still playing in my head. I'm like, I gotta find out who did this movie. But also what I loved about the film was that the main character had this like relationship with a coworker who happened to be a black woman. And what I loved about it was that the topic is sex, right? But this black woman was not hypersexualized. She wasn't objectified. She wasn't anything. She was just beautifully unremarkable. And she was rather indifferent, even though she had this effect on the main character. And so, again, I was like, I love how this person who did this film, presented this black woman, and I have to find out who made this film. So the credits roll, I see a Steve McQueen on it, and I'm like, okay. I leave the theater, and on my way home, I Googled who made this film, and then when I saw the picture of you, I was like, oh my God, you were the one who was in the movie. And so I want to say thank you, because it's when you talk about the projected image on the screen in film, and when you see yourself humanized, it's you can't overstate how important it is to see yourself, to see, just black people just being themselves. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, wow, that's lovely. Thank you so much. Very sweet of you. Very kind of you. It's very kind. Very beautiful. Wow. Thank you. Can't top that.
Thanks so much for this conversation. I noticed throughout there was sort of a language, a grammar of the body running throughout your words. You talked about the flowers being a flesh wound. Then when you were talking about bass, you talked about the experience of it sitting in your diaphragm or in your core. And then, when we were talking about Occupied City, there's this moment in the theater where the body feels solicited to just stay with the work. And you said doing work is physical. So I'm wondering what kind of work your films are asking the body to do, and how are they working on the body?
I'm not asking the body to do anything other than the mind. I mean, I have 2 legs, 2 feet, I move, I am mass. So I am not interested or fixated or have any interest in the body. That's not interesting to me at all. Never has been. It's always been about the receiving of things. So when I talk about the diaphragm, is that you receive it that way, not just through the ears, through your body. Again, but the body is not divorced from anything else other than the internal, because it's about the emotion, it's about the mind, it's about the sort of kind of how we sort of exist, philosophically, intellectually, emotionally. So it's a receiver. It's a as in just like a speaker. It has a certain sense of sort of how can I say, antennae. We're not divorced from anything, and that's what it's about in that way. As far as that is concerned, the flesh wounds of the flower is more to do with pain. I say maybe illustrated in that way because there's an image and that way, but it's more to do with the pain, to do with trauma, to do with these flowers, these sort of these things were a bed witness, and what happened is, which is a constant for me, and my relatives, and who I am, as it were. So it's about more to do, when you look at that as sort of an image which is sort of, how can I say, an image which is sort of welcoming. It lures you into something which is not particularly pleasant. So that's what I'm after. That's what I'm interested in. That's what, when I was looking at those flowers, it was a case of the sort of kind of the smell even of it, the smell and the memory and the pain.
And that's why that title is so powerful and meaningful.
Yeah, it's sweet with pain. I mean, it's just this scent. Again, you walk around and it's all your senses are sort of heightened. I mean, that's the Caribbean, that's the West Indies. I mean, again, where my parents are from is a place called Setiers, and I've told this story before. For example, the Grenada, was first the Arawaks were on that island, the Arawak native people, and then the Caribs came over from South America. Killed most, if all the Arawaks, all the Arawaks, and again cannibalism. There was, that going on. Then the French came, killed all of the Caribs up into the northernmost point of the island, and that's where my parents come from. Where instead of surrendering to the French, they all jumped off the cliff. Leapers, satyrs meaning leapers in French. Rather than them surrendering, they all jumped off the cliff to the death. I don't know if they thought it was death or salvation. I have no idea what death they thought, what they thought that was, but they all jumped. And then the French, of course, put a Catholic church there as a cherry on the cake and called it Setiers. Then, of course, 100-year war with the British, English took over the island, and then after that, repopulated with Africans. So within 1654, within less than 100, 200 years, this island's been repopulated 5 times. And then after the abolition of slavery, you get Indians, Indian population, and some Chinese. So you get this place in the world which has been sort of has been this sort of cannibalized so often. And again, these plants have been there bearing witness to this for centuries. So,
And you've spent a lot of time there, because
Yeah.
Carib's Leap, the two
Yeah.
works that you made,
Yeah.
Ashes
Yeah.
and Carib's Leap, were both based in that area.
Yes. So yeah, it's more. Yeah, I would say it's more of a scent, because it's so it's sickly sweet, I would say.
How do you think about description? Because I find your frames are quite singular, but are you interested in a hyperrealism or a lot of detail, excessive detail?
Description? No, no. I'm more like turn off the lights and find it in the dark. Trip over some furniture and make your geography through touch and feel. Again, I'm not an illustrator. I'm a filmmaker. Again, I like to find, like to discover. Again, I like to be informed rather than to sort of. Again, the whole idea of a filmmaker or whatever having a stencil and putting his or her or whoever's sort of ideas on something, I find really odd. You have to discover it. You have to ask you, to tell you what it wants. If you're serious, at least as far as I'm concerned, I'm not an illustrator. No, absolutely not. No.
About Sunshine State, I'm curious to know, when the sun are on the screens, what is the source of the sound that we're hearing?
So that's again, there's no sound in space. But what I was interested in is a certain sense of, I wanted at that point to have some abstraction. I wanted to have some, again, the subwoofer. That's what's coming out of those boxes. I wanted to sort of make, because in something which is suspended, I want it to be grounded. And I knew that the sound would ground people. It will sort of soak in. It will soak in a lot of the information which had been given. So I didn't want it to. I didn't want it to float off. I wanted to ground it somehow. I wanted to bring gravity to the work at that moment. And again, that it had a certain kind of reverberation from, the sound is bouncing off you. So therefore, you are participating in the narrative in a real way, in a real capacity, not just as a viewer, but as a witness to something. Because I think also my father wanted witnesses. I think what he did was very special. Because why didn't he tell me when he was running around, whatever? But at that moment, it was like he just got a piece of paper and said, "Hold this, hold that, hold on to this." It was about a witness. He wanted to be witnessed, and at that moment, the sound, I wanted to have a certain sense of gravity, and a moment of suspension. Yeah.
How did you find, or what is it, or where it comes from, the strength with which you are able to talk about such horrific things from such a deep personal
It's my duty, it's I want the weight, I want the responsibility. That's not even a question. It's not, how could I not? I mean, it's, again, it's part of it is my existence, but also I have to verbalize it. I have to feel it. I want to be healthy. You see us walking down the street half crazy. I need to do that. I need to. It's a necessity. It's only, if I don't do that, things will happen. I have to. It's not a question.
With that, there were some very key words: duty, trauma, and I would like to add visual accountability and evidence. What's interesting in this talk today is that we mentioned Grenfell, but most of us have not seen it or experienced it. And your decision to venture on a project and retract from making it available visually because your first responsibility was to the families.
Absolutely.
And that is that's so interesting that it's presented as a project within the art system, and yet it's your decision to pay first priority to the families as a kind of memorial, but also to pay attention to the fact that what actually happened, and to try to seek evidence and to make that available to those during a time when the case was still under investigation. So I find that sort of extraordinary as a work in its own right that has yet to be seen by others. And it reminds me also I think you tell the story about your father 3 times throughout the Sunshine State.
Oh, we tell it 4 times, but the last one is just words. Yeah. Just words, yeah.
And you had mentioned that it was about, sort of taking away phrases and taking away language, but at the same time, it is about how a person who has been traumatized recovers memory, and that it's always different, and that there are blind spots within the understanding of what actually happened throughout a traumatic experience. There was a moment where you hear the gunshot, but then in another way, when you're explaining it, you actually say there are 2 gunshots. There's the pop, and then in one retelling, you don't hear the pop anymore.
Yes, I just edited it out. I mean, again, it was trying to tell the story in 4 different ways, and taking one phrase out and then adding at the other. Yeah, it's just one of those things which I was just interested in sort of, again, erasure and memory, and again, it's emphasizing and the emphasis of, again, it's just playing with that. But again, that's work. That's just physical work in the sense of actually, putting one thing over here. I mean, I only could do that because I've got 2 arms and 2 legs and a brain to do that. So it's very important that it's just work. And I think that's, and again, I want to end maybe to talk on that. That again, it's just, I don't want to say just, but it's WORK, and we need to do it. We just need to do it, and I'm grateful that I can do it. That's it. So I'll do it until I die, and that's the end of it. Good.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening.